All right, let me check for the live real quick. 1 second. And let me share it with the group too. Where is it? There we go. Share in a group. There needs to be like a way to do this more seamlessly.
But when we finish the interview, I would end up your brain about how to do this live stream stuff on Facebook. I'm so tech challenged.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's part of why I'm doing the challenge too, is to help people understand how to do it. Okay. All right, we're now live. I want to welcome Celinne Da Costa to the Those That Inspire interview. I've known Celinne for a little over a year now. I met her through another friend and another Facebook group. And we've actually hung out a few times in person in New York City. So welcome. I'm glad to have you here.
Glad to be here.
And I think you have a very interesting story to tell. You're originally from Italy, but half Brazilian. Spent a lot of time in the United States, and you were in corporate America for a while, and now have your own business where you travel around the world all the time, pretty much. So I'll let you take it from there and kind of give an introduction of who you are.
Yeah, sure. It's always like such a big question, but I'll give a couple nuggets and then you can expand where you want to. So yes, as Patrick said, I'm originally from Italy. I am also half Brazilian, so I have a little bit of a mixed multicultural kid background going on. I spent the latter half of my life growing up in the US, which profoundly shaped me in many ways, which will become clear, I think, also throughout this interview. So I just basically did the whole American dream thing where I went to school here. I got into like a really good university, went into corporate, and I was in advertising. I was doing strategy work in advertising, and all of a sudden, found myself like in this corporate job, like this shiny corporate job that like, and I've always wanted one of the best agencies in the country, and I'm here in New York City, and I'm not happy. It's there's a lot of, and again, these are things that I can elaborate on whatever you're interested in, Patrick. But the short of it is, I was not happy. I was miserable. I was feeling completely alienated from myself, from others, and I realized I spent like so many years of my life essentially doing what I was told to do indirectly. Directly. And so I hit a breaking point where I essentially was like, I call it my like, can I swear on this?
Yeah, sure, why not?
I call it my like fuck this shit moment, which I think everybody has one. Everybody who like goes on this journey has like a fuck this shit moment, and that was mine. When I was in corporate, and I was just like, you know what, like I can't do this anymore. I'm going to change my life, and so I did 6 months after I decided that I was going to change everything. I essentially designed this social experiment in which I challenged myself to circumnavigate the globe by couch surfing through my social network, and not like the internet, but like human beings, like essentially staying in the homes of people who are connected to me somehow. Spent a year doing that. As I did that, I was telling stories. I was creating lots of content, grew my following, got featured in a bunch of places. And that was basically like the foundation that then allowed me to create my business as a brand, story, and life design coach. So that was like really truncated. I'm happy to like expand on anything and all of it, but just didn't want to.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's great. And I think your story is kind of relatable to a lot of people right now. I had the same thing. I loved what I was doing. I was actually in New York City as well, and really liked the company I was working for, kind of the stuff I was doing, but I didn't see like the purpose for my own life, and I really felt like something was missing. And I think we all, as digital nomads or whatever you want to call us, location nomad entrepreneurs, decided that we wanted to try something new. I think I had a really great question for you, and it said, you mentioned in another interview that I was watching, it says negative emotions are not bad. They're a sign just that something needs to change. Could you talk a little bit about that and like kind of expand on that?
For sure. So this is something that I've learned as of recent, that I've really, because it's one thing to like hear things, and it's another thing to really integrate them into your body, to like feel them, like an existential point of view. So I, in the past, I've struggled a lot with depression. I had like really bad clinical depression in college. And I still have it sometimes, even though like now I can actually deal with it. But, you know, we're talking like that crippling, like, oh my God, I can't breathe. Like, I don't want to do anything with my life kind of depression. I struggled with anxiety. I was hospitalized for an anxiety attack once, like really bad anxiety, really bad stress. I was like, I was even thinking about this yesterday. I'm like, I was a stress ball. Like I could identify with that term. And so I went through like just these huge like waves of emotions when I was younger. And again, it's part of my constitution, I guess, in some cases. So and I used to beat myself up, you know, because you know, you have these moments of like high energy, like I'm so happy, everything's great in life, like let me create. And then you essentially, like, because we're human, we have to cycle out of that high energy. Like we just have to, like, that's part of being like a human being. And we cycle into like this place of like, you know, and I know every creator goes through this, of like, it's like a slump, like, you know, the writer's block. They're like, I'm not inspired. I'm feeling down. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling upset. And I used to just beat myself up because as a creative, this is like not only unpleasant to feel negative emotions, it's also like bad to the bad. And I'm going to break this apart in a minute, but like, we think it's bad to the creative process, right? So we kind of just go to it a halt. We're like, oh my God, I can't like produce until I'm back into that like high energy. So one of the things that I've learned through practice, through my self-development, through my mentors, is that we need to stop looking at negative emotions as a bad thing, but rather as markers that something needs to be adjusted, or that something needs to be felt or welcomed or allowed in. So, you know, for example, the reason why I was having like crazy anxiety and depression and like all these things was because I was essentially fighting for something I did not want. You know, I was every day waking up and like putting forth energy and like my vital life, like my life force, into a purpose, into a destination that I didn't want to go on. You know, like the whole, like, I need to be working really, really hard and showing up for my corporate job, like, you know, for this faceless corporation that I don't actually care about, but I have to work really hard. So let me do it. Right. Or like the stress of like, oh my God, I have all these projects. I don't actually care about them, but I have to meet those deadlines. And so these markers, or even sadness, you know, like, oh, I feel so lonely, or like, oh, I feel like nobody gets me. These are all things that are basically like, okay, if you actually just sit, you pull one out and you pull out that sadness and you're like, okay, let me just sit with this sadness and feel it. And you're like, wow, that feels bad. But it's also telling me that I need to surround myself with better people. It's also telling me that I'm feeling angst because I'm pushing against something that I don't want to do, which is like basically a sign that you need to readjust your sails. And even though you're still going to feel sad, you might still feel a little depressed. At least you know that you're heading in the in the right direction. So I feel the cycle is going to happen, and we're going to feel negative emotions. So we can either be a victim of them and allow them to basically paralyze us and make us feel unhealthy, not just like mentally, but in our bodies, because obviously stress has physical repercussions. Or we can choose to actually let that emotion flow through our bodies, which is going to suck because it's, you know, it's being sad isn't fun. And actually sit with it and be like, like, how can I perceive this negative emotion as actually just a bookmark, or like, you know, a marker that's going to point me in the right direction?
Absolutely. I think my own journey, I felt like a roller coaster. I started on this super high on this nomad cruise, and then I got to Europe and I was on a low, and I went back and forth, up and down. And I think it still happens every day, right? Nobody's super happy every moment of every day, but you know that better days are coming. You know that you don't have to, like, you're not a victim of yourself for, I'm going to be depressed and anxious all the time. And you can take that energy and actually, as a creator, I mean, we're all creators now. You can really share that story, and people relate to that because everybody has the same emotions going through them. And I think there's a lot of shame that we are not able to talk about it. I think that's changing. Actually, in the last year, I've seen social media change quite a bit, where people are talking more about being honest with their emotions. It's not so much about making my life look perfect. It's more about helping other people. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I was actually going to say that I did an audit of my own content the other day just to kind of see like where I needed to improve and what I needed to do. And insanely, like the highest engagement posts I've created always, I call it shed light on my shadow side,
Yep.
which is very fascinating. Every time I'm like, I'm vulnerable, I'm lonely, I'm sad. This is what I'm doing about it. This is how I'm working through it. And again, I think you know that I have a certain strategy and way of telling stories that is actually supporting my business, is actually supporting my mission. So it's not like I'm just like, well, I'm sad, like my life sucks, but I do leverage and you know, I work with vulnerability a lot in my work and just basically giving vulnerability at a dosage where it doesn't feel like really intimidating and overwhelming to the person who's receiving it. And it's also applicable to that person. But I definitely think that we're entering this new wave where vulnerability and actually like being honest and forthcoming about the shadow side, as I call it, is something that's being socially accepted and socially welcomed. And not only that, it's necessary because again, you know, especially because this is a creators network, I just want to stress this idea of like, and me as a writer, you know, I get the writer's blocks all the time. Like I get the process. And one of the things that I realized is that when I'm cycling through the less like, you know, we have these phases of like, I want to create, I'm going to like shoot like 5 videos today and just freaking edit the shit out of everything, blah, 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 let's go, you know, and I'm the same way where I'm like, I'll be like, oh my God, I'm going to write like 10 pages like today. Like I'm so inspired. And then I'll have another day where I'm staring at a page for like 6 hours, 7 hours because I'm sad or I'm upset or something and I can't write, but I can't stress enough that we need to learn how to basically take, I call it, you know, the hot energy. You have like anxiety, excitement, inspiration, like all the things that are agitated. And then you have the cool energy, which is like the, you know, the sadness, the depression, but also serenity and calm. And to actually, when we're going through these phases, these low phases, to actually learn how to channel those phases into like producing content, but in a different way. So I wouldn't like maybe write like 10 pages that day, but I would spend that time to plan out my chapters, which is like less like hot energy and more like cool energy, but still contributing to the creative process. So learning how to basically not be a victim of that cycle, but rather learning to write it like when it's high and then like preparing for the high when it's low, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's actually why in the challenge, I'm saying you don't have to write every single day. You can buffer your content. You can create a few posts in a row and then get that out there so you're ready and you don't have to worry about, oh, I'm in a low today. I don't really feel like creating content. But so when I first met you, I was super inspired that you already had a book out. You wrote for Forbes. I wanted you to tell your story a little bit about that because I think that's super inspiring and people going through this challenge can realize where you can go with doing something like this. So if we can talk a little bit about your story, getting all the way to Forbes, writing this second book, I think I just bought it. I'm super excited to read it. And where you go there, and then maybe we can talk about some practical things for people too.
Yeah, absolutely. So with my journey with content creation, I know it's first of all, it's really cool you're doing this challenge because one of the things I would say that consistency is super, super important. Another thing, another layer, I don't know if you've talked about this, I'm sure you have, but I would add to this is like actually tightening up your vision and having a strategy as you're creating this content, almost like creating a funnel for this content to be going through. So something that you know, I personally did from the very beginning, and I think you witnessed yourself, is that even before I left New York City, even before I got on that plane, I had a vision for what I wanted to create from a creator perspective. So even though I didn't know that I was going to grow a following, I didn't know I was going to get featured in like different publications. I didn't know that information, but I did know that I was going into this with like, I'm going to sell the story and I'm going to create a really strong brand around this project that I'm doing so that it gets people's attention. So instead of like, you know, when I started to actually tell stories and create content, whether it was on Instagram, I was writing long form captions before most people were doing that. I was telling stories about humanity every day. I was writing articles, I was blogging, I was doing all these things, but it wasn't just like, it was partially like, let me just write what I feel today. And it was partially like, what do people need to hear that feeds into the story? So that is what I would call like when it comes to, I mean, this is what I do. This is my coaching work and I can't like stress it enough. Branding. We are in the era where personal branding is everything. And as a creator, there's like just so many freaking creators out there, and they're all excellent. And at the end of the day, what's really going to set you apart in the market, in a really crowded market, is your personal brand. And I can't
Absolutely.
enough times. And when I say personal brand, it's so important that even as you're, you know, like even things like right now, we're talking about authenticity and how it's important to be real and raw and all these things, but even that can be curated to an extent. And that's not to say the actual vulnerability has to be curated, but the actual act of how you deliver it can be curated, to whom you deliver it to. And so there is this level of like paying attention to the personal brand that you're creating around yourself so that it serves you and your goals and your audience and your business. And that's like the art of storytelling is sandwiched right in there. Like it's basically like, how do you tell stories in a way that actually builds up your brand, captures people's attention, and gets them, you know, either engaging with you or whatever your intent. If you have a business, it's like, how do you create content that sells for itself? Or if you have like, if you're wanting to get like sponsorships or partnerships, it's like, how do you create content that really captures people's attention? So with my journey, my strategy was tell a story every single day, because I want to be positioned as like somebody who's a master of storytelling. And so if I want to be a master of storytelling, I need to tell stories, and I need to do so in a way that actually like serves my bigger vision. And with things like Forbes, or like the other publications I've been featured in, this is what you can't Google, which is people were inspired by my story. Like with Forbes specifically, a woman I freelanced for once back in the day, she went to work for Forbes, and then she asked me, hey, what's up? And I told her my story of like what I was doing. And she was like, oh my God, that's incredible. I need you to write for me. And that was how I started writing for them. So it's really like, what is your story? How do you package it in a way that you can basically like dole it out in many different ways, but every way that you do it, it just goes back to one singular vision. That's what is quite tricky.
Absolutely. And I think, I don't think we've talked about it yet. You said reverse engineering, right? You have kind of a vision for where you want to go, and then you start breaking down the process into little pieces, right? Can you expand on that?
Yeah. So everything when it comes to storytelling, effective storytelling, whether it's literally like life story, like me changing a chapter of my story, which is manifestation, or things that are smaller, like, I don't know, getting featured. I always start with the end in mind, which is basically like, what is the story that you want someone to walk away with? And this is something they also teach you with things like TED Talks. You know what I mean? It's like one idea, one thing that you want to walk away with. And for me, I knew that for example, with my project specifically, I knew that the end result that I wanted was for me to like design my own dream job and my own dream life, and like not go back to corporate. So I knew that if I wanted to do that for myself, then I needed to create opportunities. So how do I create opportunities? People. So how do I get people's attention? I tell a story that's really going to serve them, that's really going to get them like to grab on. And, you know, I'll layer under that basically like, how do I tell it? How does that story reach them?
Right.
Numbers, right? So I have to write something that's really sticky. I have to create something that's going to capture people's attention. And then the next layer of that is, what can capture someone's attention? What if I did a really crazy social experiment that like gets people to be like, wow, what is that? Oh, that's interesting. How do I develop that social experiment? And then basically you keep digging under and under and under to being like, okay, so then the execution of what I need to be doing is I need to be writing a story every single day about something really crazy that most people won't do, so that this story can maybe reach somebody who's like scrolling through their feed that morning, and that person's gonna be like, oh, I wonder what this chick's all about. Click on my profile and be like, oh my God, she has like this whole like series of stories. And then, you know, go on my website being like, wow, that's amazing. And then like the next day they were talking to somebody who works at BuzzFeed and they tell them about me. So it's basically like my strategy from the beginning was to like be a sticky story on top of people's minds. And by writing stories every day to kind of like continue refreshing that, so that people would constantly think of me and approach me. And that's what happens to this day. Like I never reach out for interviews. I never really reach out for like publications, and I keep getting people in my inbox. It's basically like a magnetizing rather than pushing strategy. And that is done through my personal brand.
Absolutely. I want people to relate to you a little bit more. Could you, I know you've told me stories, I think in Nepal, you were staying in different houses. Could you give people like just one of these stories? It doesn't have to be super long, but I think it'd be super interesting for people.
Oh, for my stories of couch surfing?
Yeah, like when you started, I think because a lot of people are starting this journey right now. They've never done a 90-day challenge. They've never posted. When you first left New York City, I know you have some interesting stories of like you were, I think, just you went around the world and basically didn't pay for housing or anything, right? You were just like couch surfing. Can you kind of just dive into that a little bit more and tell like one story?
Yeah, I was like, when I left New York, all the excuses, like you name it, like I don't have money, I don't know what to do with my stuff, like I don't know like what I'm gonna do for work. Like I had all of those things in my head, all those fears in my head, and I just said, fuck it, I gotta do what's like really right for me, and you know what's good for my heart. And so obviously I saved up a little bit of money, but I still was like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I don't actually know what job I am other than this what I'm hoping to achieve. I put my stuff in like a box in my mom's place. I, again, did not have that much money. And so what I started to do is I was traveling, like staying in people's homes for free, obviously. And I, like, just to give you a net before I dive into the specifics of it, in 9 months, I spent $8,500 traveling around the world. That's including my tickets. And I spent, $8,500. I stayed, it's around 20 countries, and I had over 70 hosts. So that was super cool. And like, I would just kind of show up every day, like, and either like the ways that I was getting hosts was like through friends of friends. Like sometimes my social network, I didn't really have a big following back then though. So it was a lot of just like pure human networking. And one of the, I guess, crazier, weirder stories that I went through is when I was in Greece, I had a host in Santorini, and the host was like, oh, like, you know, he was telling me about like an island, off the coast of Santorini. He was like, you need to visit this place. It's so beautiful. And I was like, I don't know anyone there. Like that kind of like puts a wrench in my project, because everywhere I go, I kind of try to line up a host first. And he's just like, yeah, I don't know anyone either, but I do know this guy. What's his name? Let's say Stefanos or something. He's this guy Stefanos. And I met him once. He owns a cafe. He's pretty cool. He was nice. I had a conversation with him, and I was like, all right, here I go. And then I like basically jumped on a little boat, and I showed up to this coffee shop that I had written on a piece of like napkin. And then I show up to the coffee shop, and I'm like, hi, is Stefanos there? And he's like, yeah, hi. And then I was just like, yeah, my friend, what's his name? Your host, my friend, your host. He told me to come here. He's like, yeah, your host. He's a nice guy. I remember him. Like, yeah. So like, I'm looking for a place to stay tonight. And then he's just like, what do you mean? Like a hotel? And I'm like, no, it's not like that. And I just like explained my project to him. And I was basically like, I just basically need to be somewhere for free tonight, because otherwise it screws up my project. And this guy was just like, okay. And then he takes out his like little playbook, because he has like his contact list on like an actual book, like the 80s, and he just starts calling everybody on the island, but it's like high season and there was no place to stay. And eventually he's just like, I guess you can just stay in my house. and then I like literally crashed on his couch for the next 3 days, and it was like the most like we made such good friends. And like I even now like I still talk to him. Like it was just funny, because it's just these moments where you kind of it was really symbolic for me, where it's just like, okay, I actually don't know what I'm doing, I don't know where I'm going, I do know it feels right, I do know that this is the adventure I was looking for. So let me just go out there and figure it out. And you know, worst case scenario, sure, like I get a hostel, like, you know, so I'm not going to like sleep on the streets. And even if I do, it's actually a really nice street, and it's like a really nice village. So you know what I mean? It's not, the risks are like the possibility of what you can achieve and win is just so much higher than the actual risk, because we like to amplify risks in our mind and make things way scarier than they actually are. But when we sit down and actually map out a worst case scenario, most of the times it's not that bad. And 98% of the times that worst case scenario is like very unlikely to happen. Just as unlikely, if not more, than your best case scenario. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
You can gamble either way. So you can, you know, do you want to do it the way that can give you massive payoffs, or do you want to just like live in fear? So
yeah. Tim Ferriss talks about that too a lot, and he's like, he's like, I can he doesn't want something to happen, so he like prepares something to not happen, and he's like, what is the worst case? And then it's likely that it will never get there. So yeah, I think your story is amazing that you were able to do it. And I mean, anybody can do this, right? Like, I think you said this on the podcast with Alexander, like, you believe anybody that could do this if they wanted to, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, of course, when I say this, like, there are exceptions when it comes to, like, obviously if there's like a child in like Ghana, like, I don't know like the extremity of the situation, but what I do believe is that if you're like sitting here watching this interview right now, you have a computer or you have a phone, and you're probably in a place where, like, yeah, maybe you don't make all the money, or like maybe you're not like the wealthiest, but you're probably in a place of privilege enough where you have time, that means, and space to like sit here and watch this. And if that is the case, I absolutely fucking believe that you can do it, and you can do way, way more than maybe you're holding yourself to. Because we, you know, one of the things that I believe is that we, people that are born in a privileged situation, and again, like, I've had shit going on in my life. Like, I grew up in a low income household. Like, it's not like I like grew up with like a silver spoon in my mouth. I've had a lot of issues, like both emotional, childhood traumas, like, you know, things that are like not so nice and like didn't put me in an advantageous, like, I'm not privileged in the sense of like, you know, coming from a wealthy family or whatever. But that being said, I was born in like, I have an Italian passport, like, I have mobility, like, you have an American passport, like, we have a certain set of privileges. And I so believe that when we're in this place, and the only thing that's holding us back is our fear, or like our fear to be like seen or recognized, or to really create what we want to create. It's our responsibility to move past that fear and actually do something with our gifts and with our privilege. Because if not, it's a disservice to everyone who actually does not have this privilege, to everyone who is like in a shitty situation that they can't get out of as easily as we can. You know, and it's like, we are the people who are going to inspire those people to do better. You know, like, you know,
Yep.
You look at all the cases of like that kid in like Uganda who like decides that he's going to be a runner, and all of a sudden he becomes like an Olympic champion. Like, he needs like to see other people doing it and
Yep.
pulling themselves out of that. So it's like, if we are dealt privilege, it's our responsibility to like not let, like, if money and or like food on the table or like a roof over our head is not like the main issue that's driving our actions every day, we have something more to contribute. We have like, it's, I just can't stress how much I believe this is like our responsibility, and to for ourselves, and to give that gift to others as well.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm doing this group. I want to, like, me doing my own 90-day challenge just a year ago was a really powerful thing in my own life, for my own business, for projects I wanted to create, and my own mental development. And now, because I've done it, because I've gone through that process, I'm really excited to help other people do it and make them realize where they can go with their own development. So yeah, I think we're doing the right thing. And we also have tools. Like, I think that 5 years ago, we didn't have this tool to sit here. You're currently in Rome, Italy. I'm in Virginia, and we're able to do this interview where we wouldn't have been able to do this 5 years ago, and share our story. So I think we have a lot of ability, and we do have privilege. Like, I'm not saying anybody will be able to do this without some hardship. I also don't think we should tell people that they have to go travel around the world to live the life of their dreams. Like, that's not the point. But you can take control of your own life, I think, right? You can start writing, you can share your own story, then you could do something versus, like, I think you said, and maybe you can go into this a little bit more, is when you didn't feel the purpose. You didn't feel like you were doing things at your previous job that you really thought were meaningful for your own life, and now you do, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting you hit on this, because this is something that even with in my coaching, my brand story and life design coaching, when I work with my clients, you know, a lot of them are coming to me like being like, oh my God, I'm feeling completely stuck. I don't know how to brand myself. I don't know how to take my business to the next level. But it's like, I can't live, like, how can I tell a story if I'm not living like your life, where I'm like in a, you know, in a different country every week, where I'm doing this, or like when I'm not doing extreme things, is something that, you know, a lot of my clients come to. So they think your story's not interesting, or they think it's not like enough. And what I tell them is, you know, like, traveling is just an execution of like something I love, and it's like an execution of that. But everybody has like a really, really fascinating story to tell. And I truly like believe this with every fiber of my being, that everybody has something to teach us. Like everybody has like a story that is going to interest us, is going to engage us. And part of like this journey is actually like being able to step into that story and like own it and be able to like tell it to people in a way that feels really good to you and in a way that actually like contributes to your mission. But you have to show up for yourself. You have to actually tell the story and like not be bogged down by like these beliefs, like erroneous beliefs that like you need to like do this or XYZ for you to like be an effective creator, or like for you, like, you know, you can be a creator and not travel at all and like create the most amazing films or like the most amazing writing. The creative process is not external, it's internal. So it's a lot of like who you are and finding out what makes you unique. Like the journey is internal, and I can't stress that enough. And the traveling part is just cool because it's like a physical manifestation of that journey, and it's nice. But like at the end of the day, you don't need to travel. You don't need to be doing any of that shit that like a lot of entrepreneurs, like, you know, living their best life and posting selfies on Instagram are doing for you to be extremely successful and like a very amazing content creator.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every single person has their own influence. I think that people think, oh, I have to have influence over the entire world and I have to get 100,000 followers. Like, no, the guy down the street, you could help him bake an awesome cake, or like whatever your skill set is, you can definitely help people in your local community. You can, like, everybody has their own story to tell, and everybody has their own unique things that they're good at that they can help other people be good at, right? So like I'm trying to really get to the point where I'm helping people program, because I think that's a really useful skill for people. And now with this content challenge, I'm trying to put that information out there more. So I appreciate what you're doing. This is actually one of the most viewed live streams I've had, so that's pretty exciting. I'm going to just throw it out there that if anybody is watching and wants to ask a question, please do so. Put it in the comments below. And now I would like to kind of dive into more of the practical side. What do you do? Like, what is your process? You post, I think you mentioned long form copy on your posts. Do you do hashtags? Do you post on Medium? I'm just curious, like, how was this process of becoming this influencer created? I know it's a long process, and I want people to know, like, not every day you have to like post every single thing. So make overwhelmed, but the ability for them to tell their story and get it out there, I think, in the practical way, because I think we're missing some of this practical stuff in out there.
Yeah. So obviously, like all the things like the consistency and the high quality content, I'm not going to touch on that because I'm assuming that's obvious.
Yeah.
So when it comes to, you know, for me personally, content creation, I produce content like a machine. So for me, one the things that really like were important from the beginning to align myself with the platforms that actually work for me and like feel good to me. So one of the things that, you know, a lot of people, like even with my clients, they stress out. They're like, oh, I got to be on Pinterest, and I got to be on LinkedIn, and I got to be on Facebook. And it's like, ideally, you should be everywhere in a really strategic manner. But if you're like on your own and you don't have a marketing team to hire and basically to do this shit for you, you should be doing what you can do, as long as you're doing it really well, because it is quality over quantity. As much as consistency is important, it's better to produce quality content. And so for me, from the beginning, I really love Instagram. I generally just love it because I love the idea of having a picture. I love photography. I love being photographed, as you know. And so I love the idea of having a picture and matching it with like words, because as you also know, I tell long form stories, and sometimes maybe people don't have the time or chance to like read the whole thing, and they just skim. So I just find the combination, like, because you have to think about it from a user experience standpoint, and you got to think about it from like a what do you actually want to do standpoint. So for me, I like photography. I want to do photography. I like writing. I want to write. And I find that when I combine the two in one bite, like in one thing that somebody can get through in a minute, then the user, my audience, will most likely be consuming that content. And then I don't really like Facebook, and I know it's important. So I make sure that everything is reposted on Facebook automatically. And then sometimes I'll add like some extra content. I have an assistant who basically like posts either like videos I've done or interviews I've done on my Facebook page, because again, I don't like Facebook. I don't even care for Pinterest, so I don't touch it. And again, I know it's a huge again, the world is, you're always gonna be surrounded by missed opportunities. But I think if you can do, like, if you love blogging, blog. If you hate it, don't do it. Like, this is, you're not going to want to create if you're running, you're fighting yourself all the time. So for me, I found a system that really actually aligns with what I love. I love to be on video. So I will say yes to like podcasts or video interviews because that's content I can repurpose. I love taking photos, and it's really easy for me to find people to take photos with. So that's what my Instagram is for. I love writing short form. So that's why I use Instagram for. So the practical ways, number one is to identify like the actual platforms that feel good to you, regardless of what everyone says. Like, yeah, maybe everyone's telling you to post on Medium, but if you don't like that style, like, it needs to match your flow, basically is what I'm saying, because you can thrive in anything as long, like, if you freaking love Reddit, then go on Reddit and do your thing on Reddit, because a lot of people like don't know how to Reddit like you do. That's how you like start to niche yourself and really differentiate yourself. And for me, my philosophy is simple. I do one story a day. I don't like hold a gun to my head being like, I have to do a story every day. If it's like 5 or 6 stories a week, then that's what it is. And I write 2 long form articles a month because I don't like writing long form articles. And so I respect that, but I also understand that it's important. And I do a lot of interviews and podcasts and things like that. But when it comes to content creation, I just don't go against my flow. I go with it. What it is that I need, what it is I want. And in terms of like hashtags and all that shit, it's just like, these are all just tactics. You know what I mean? It's all things you can Google. It's all things you can ask people about. Instagram's algorithm is always changing. But at the end of the day, what you really need to be asking yourself, which I think a lot of people aren't, instead of chasing likes and comments and like hashtags, it's like, what is the big strategy here? What is the big vision behind what you're doing? And is it supporting your business? Is it supporting what you're actually doing? Regardless of how many likes you get that day. Sometimes you got to sacrifice likes for purpose or like vision or to get your point across, Well,
what I've seen over time is that it's going to be organic if you do quality content, if you're consistent and you're really just trying to help your audience. And it's going to be the fact that, okay, your influence today might be the 4 people that you had dinner with last night. But those people, if they really like your content and you're helping them, they're going to tell other people. And over time, it will really grow because you're just providing good value for everybody. And if you provide good value, those people will tell other people. And that's how the Casey Neistats of the world, the Yes Theories, all these bigger YouTube channels, it creates a critical mass at some point, and then it just explodes because each person's telling other people about it, and then they grow organically. And I think that's the best way to do it. And it's way cheaper for one, and it's way more authentic, I think, too.
Yeah, and if you even think about, when we're talking about like actual content and growth and creation and stuff. So a lot of people are surprised to hear that I spend an average of 1.5 hours on Instagram a day. It's not that much. I don't spend that much time on it, actually. I kind of get in and get out. And so one of the things that, I used to spend way more hours, and I know people spend like 5 to 8, like just trying to like figure out the hashtags and hack the algorithm and all that shit. But if you think about it, like how many hours a day do you have? And for me, it's like, okay, I could spend 3 extra hours like commenting on everything, like figuring out hashtags, like, doing all these like super fancy stories, or I could essentially take those 3 hours and use them for networking, meaningfully messaging people, like actually building up relationships, which in the end get me most of my opportunities anyways. And then again, like with Instagram, I've already built like a strong community. Like people comment like all the time on the things that I'm saying, and I take the time to thoughtfully respond to them, and that's why they keep coming back. So my time on Instagram is actually targeted exclusively of like, is this giving people value? Is this bringing me joy? And is this fostering, communication? So the time that I do spend on it is like, if people DM me, I do, instead of being like, haha, thanks, I actually do take the time, obviously with boundaries, to like thoughtfully answer. When people are commenting on something I wrote, it's like they read my thing and they took time to write on it to reply, even if it's just a sentence. And I'm like, thank you so much for reading. Like, what did you, and then I thoughtfully respond to something they say. So to me, that is so much more powerful than like figuring out like a sexy hashtag that gets my views, like so that I can get more likes or more visibility, but more so, how do I like build this community of people that feel close to me, that feel like I'm interacting with them because I am. And that is when I read when I publish a story, I'm like, hey guys, my course is out. My new brand story course is out. Hey guys, my book is out. Those are the people that are like, oh my God, I just bought it. And then they like post about it, So it's like, to me, that's more currency than sitting around like fucking around with the algorithm and like all these like simple strategies. It's like focus on working smarter, not harder. And actually like with the time that you're putting into not just the content creation, but the content management part of it, make sure it's so thoughtful and so just packed with value in a way that you enjoy. So that people not only, again, you're producing high quality content and then you're hammering in that into people's psyche that you're like producing high quality content and you're a high quality creator and that's what you do. You actually sit there and you actually connect with other humans who are interested in your art instead of sitting around fucking around with like stupid hashtags. You know what I mean? It's different way of thinking that I found that the people who like think in this thoughtful, like how can I serve, like how can I be of service, how can I create content that actually impacts, are the ones that are creating impact, as opposed to people who are like, let me just like spend 3 hours editing your photo and then push it out and then like hope I get like enough likes for the day. So
yeah, and actually this relates to a term that I was actually introduced to as an engineer at my previous job, but I think it relates to anything, which is subject matter expert. And you become super awesome in your own niche. And I think for me, it's more the programming side right now. I got big into photography a bit, so I'm interested in that, but I'm not necessarily a subject matter expert, but I can be a subject matter expert in coding. You're a subject matter expert in storytelling. That's kind of what you personally branded yourself. You have other things that are going on, but that's something that's super unique to you, right? So if people choose whatever it is, and again, that doesn't have to be them traveling around the world. It can be something local. So just can touch on that just a little bit.
Yeah. One of the things, I used to think like you had to be everything for everybody. And I know there's like those influencers who have like 1 million followers and like whatever, everyone engages with them and stuff. But one of the things, I also think that's something that happened a few years ago. Basically there was a wave where, certain influencers or certain people like caught a bunch of followers and was everything to everybody. And that wave has passed. And now we are in like basically a stage of niching down is everything. And I found that there's so much more power in being like specific than there is in being like too open-ended. And one of the things that, I realized from the beginning, like I knew this, like one of the things I basically cracked even before I started building a following, even before I started writing, is that I need to find one thing that I'm really good at. And one of the things that, you basically want, like when you think about my brand, like name me like top 3 words that come to mind for you.
Storytelling, great pictures, exciting, travel, inspiring, things like that.
Okay. So it's basically like, I thank you. But one of the reasons why I was saying that is, and another thing that comes up for a lot of people is human connection. Okay. So one of a few things, like inspiring, human connection, travel, exciting, like all these like words, you want to be basically in charge of like what people, you can't control what other people think of you, but you want to disseminate like the sort of content that actually like gets people to pay attention to. And one of the things that I knew from the very beginning is that I needed to basically position myself as somebody who every time someone thought of a storyteller, of human connection, of like self-discovery and travel, like I wanted to be on top of that person's mind. And so, when I was like even pitching to boards of tourism and I had like 3,000 followers, it wasn't even like I didn't have a following, and I got all these sponsored trips that actually helped me subsidize my travels, because one of the things that the angle that I came at from the very beginning was I can tell a story like no one else can. And so I don't care if like this dude has 20,000 followers and that guy's a way better photographer than me, and this guy can like, hack Instagram and like, get like way more views on your story. I know that I'm going to tell something about your country, your company, your brand, and I'm going to pull something out that no one else can pull out. And that is basically like, and it's like, how do I prove it? Here, look at what I've done. So, when it comes to branding yourself and like picking that niche, one, it's like pick your niche and stick with it. So if yours is like programming, like this is what you need to be a master at. You need to be a master in your area. For me, it's like, I want to be the master of like telling incredible stories or like weaving incredible stories out of anything, about like human connection and about like that in a way that actually grows, like bringing back that humanity in a way that's strategic. That's what I want to be known for. And then the second step of that is you have to show and not tell. And that's what a lot of creators don't get. This is where the misconnect between like having a functional business that profits and like being an artist is that like you being an artist, it's like, yeah, you have your own creative, like, you know, you're doing whatever it is that you felt like doing, waking up that morning, and you're expressing yourself fully and yada, yada. But where you make that transition into like creating a business that actually like feeds your creativity and supports your mentors like financially is basically like you go from artist to like, okay, how can I create content that serves my niche? And how do I position myself in my niche in a way that like no one can replace me? And that's going to require some adjustments and, dare I say, sacrifices on the artist archetype, you know? So for you to, you have the artist and you have the businessman or woman. So it's like, you know, for me, I would like to live somewhere in between where I'm not sacrificing my artistry, but I'm also not, you know, succumbing to like commercialism, but somewhere in between, I think is a sweet spot. And that is how you find your niche. And lastly, yeah, with your niche, it's like when you find, you nudge yourself into a corner, you're like, this is literally like what I stand for. You start becoming the go-to person for all these things. And then from there you can expand. Because a lot of things I know, like the content creator mindset's like, oh, I don't want to just like be a programmer. I'm so much more than that. But like I did challenge you to ask yourself how much of that is ego and how much of that is just like strategy for your future. Because I am so much more than, you know, a coach. Like I'm, of course, like I'm a foodie and like I have like, you know, I like to play the piano. Like I have all these like pieces of Celinne that maybe doesn't get like disseminated on the internets. And that doesn't mean I'm hiding them. It just means it's like I'm niching into something. I'm getting recognized in this industry, becoming, you know, achieving my goals through this niche. And once I really have this secure grip and handle on it, then I can expand. Like different areas and maybe bringing different parts of myself. So it's really about focusing and creating content that serves that focus, because that content is going to serve you, your personal brand, and it's going to serve your business. And it's, you know, not going to just going to make you happy, but it's going to like make you money and get you recognized and all the fun things, you know? So yeah.
Absolutely. And I've seen it myself. Actually, today was a good example. Somebody asked me a question about another content creator, Kylie Francis. And I found my own article or my own video that I did with her like 6 months ago. And I was like, oh, this is already helpful for me because I don't have to sit and tell this message again. Like this content is already going to be shared and it's saved over time. All this stuff is building. That's super exciting. I'm super happy about this interview. This is like one of the most inspiring interviews that I've had and also one of the most watched so far. So that's awesome. So thank you for being here. We did have one thing. Let me see. I just finished my semester. Scared. Sorry, let me read this real quick and then I'm going to ask you the question and then I want to ask you one question. We're going to finish up. I am still fighting, but I find hard to find myself in the last 2 years. Long story short, have you ever experienced this fall of energy and how did you fight back? I think that's the main question from there.
Which fall of energy? Can I get some context?
Yeah, so I guess I'll just read the whole thing. Yeah. So I have just finished my first semester, second of master's and most prestigious fashion school in the world in Paris, which was always my biggest goal. Until this point, I was the person you are today, always thinking positive, giving my best, not caring about the limits, not being afraid, pushing limits that actually don't exist. Somewhere along the road, I got scared and the size of my personal project ate me. I am still fighting, but I'm finding it hard to believe in myself like the past 2 years. Long story short, have you ever experienced this fall of energy and how did you fight back? Also, I'm learning about my branding as well in my master's, and while digging up my story, I had this feeling that the concept of selling a story is somehow extremely superficial. How have you ever felt this way and realized that this is a mandatory part of the process and just started doing it?
Okay. There's two questions, so I'm going to answer one, and then I might need you to remind me the other one.
Okay, sounds good. Yep.
My brain can only hold like one series of thoughts at a time.
No worries. Sorry about that.
In terms of, I don't know if you got, who was it, Katarina? I don't know if you were able to catch the first half of the live stream, but you know, I totally feel you with a down energy. I used to struggle with depression. I still do, but it used to be like really bad in college, like chronic, like for 2 years nonstop, anxiety. So I can totally. I want to let you know that what you're saying about the always thinking positive and giving your best and not caring about your limits, I think the people who can actually do that most authentically and most genuinely are the ones who experience the other side of the spectrum. Because once you like understand and feel that sort of darkness and pain, it's almost like any find ways to pull yourself out of it. That's how you like learn to appreciate the flip side of it, the light and that positivity. So what I would say, and again, I don't know like if you were able to catch the first half of the live stream, but the period that you're going through right now, what ends up happening with us when we become depressed or when we kind of get like stuck into this like in this low energy mode is that we basically start to get depressed about being depressed, and we're upset about being upset, and we essentially like start to dig ourselves deeper and deeper into like the size of our problem. So there's a couple of things, a couple of techniques that I can share. One, think about your problem. Okay, so what was the actual? It was like that. Can you? I don't know where the actual comment is because I want to.
Let me see if I can show it on the.
Yeah, because I'd love to see it. It was about the project, the bigness of the project eating you.
Yeah, it ate you. It ate her. I can't figure this out right now, but yeah.
And think about your life. Like it's really like one of the things of like this is what I call reframing. Sometimes like I get so stuck in my problems where I'm like, oh my God, I can't solve this. But here's a radical idea. You are responsible for everything in your life. You have full responsibility. You have full agency to make decisions to remove yourself from the problem. So the first thing you want to do is basically take a step back from the problem and actually ask yourself, what is the worst case scenario here? Like this problem, how big is it compared to the rest of your life? Like, is it going to put you in financial ruin? Is it going to ruin your life? Is it going to keep you from like meeting, the love of your life? Is it going to prevent you from, making new friends? The answer, I'm guessing, is probably not. And so we want to take this problem from this big monster and actually like start to make it manageable and ask yourself like, what actions can I actually take instead of guilting yourself that you're not positive, and like instead of telling yourself the story of like, oh, I used to be positive and I didn't care about limits and I used to take risks and now I'm not, now I'm just held back by fear. Why don't we take that story, package it, and toss it back? And why don't we replace a new story, which is you're capable. You're going through a cool energy period right now, which is good. It means you can slow down and actually take time to focus on what you want. So the period that you're going through is not bad. Again, it's not a bad or good situation. It's more like this is like your chance to start rebuilding and like restructuring and reevaluating what you want to create with your life. 3, with your fears, start to make a list of all the excuses. And this is actually something that I run through in my life design course. Basically making a list of all the excuses that are keeping you in this fear and essentially flipping each excuse. So for example, like for me, my excuse was like, I don't have enough money. So then take that excuse that you've written down and write down, how can I make money? And then and then it's basically like, I don't have time. And then on the other side of the table, how can I make time? And then the third step of this is each excuse that you flip, you basically take that affirmation, like, how can I make money? And you make a list of 10 things that you can do towards that problem. Towards that solution. How can I make time? 10 ways that you can make time. Even if it's literally like, I'm going to walk up like with money, I'm going to walk up to the bank and like get a loan, even though you're probably not going to do that. Just write it on your list. So basically what we want to do is take you from like a restrictive, like, oh my God, I'm depressed, I'm upset, I'm scared of my fears story, which it's feeding itself. You're just basically feeding the bad wolf. And then just being like, you know what, I'm going to take a step back from this. I'm going to make my problem smaller, kind of like step away from the problem. And then I'm going to analyze it in a way that doesn't involve me or my ego. So it's like, what are the actual issues that are constituting this problem? How can I flip those issues into a solution? And now let me make a list of all these solutions. And I would be really shocked, like really, really shocked, if in the midst of this exercise, you didn't find one thing that you can do better or another thing you can do to lift yourself out of this situation. And remember that your happiness and positivity isn't a switch. It comes from taking action. It comes from seeing results. So when you're waking up every day and you're basically taking a few things on that list and actually executing them in a way that feels good to you, you're going to slowly, day by day, start feeling happier and better. But if you keep feeding yourself that like, I'm depressed and I'm too scared story, that's pretty much all you're gonna be. That's the only thing you're gonna see, as opposed to like, well, how can I not be scared? What can I do? Then you open your blinders and you start seeing solutions and you do them. And then that happiness that you know exists, that like not caring about limits, not being afraid, all you're doing is replugging into that emotion. But you have to do your part in order for that to happen.
Awesome. I think that's going to really help her. And the second part of the question was, I think she seems like it can be kind of superficial to sometimes share your story, especially on Instagram, where everybody's kind of trying to make everything look perfect. Have you ever felt this way? And do you think it's a mandatory part of the process? And how can you kind of get around that?
Okay. So when it comes to telling your story, it's only superficial when you're creating stories to get certain reactions. And when you're like, because when I said before was curation and not manipulation, because those are two different things. So when it comes, with people, what they think with like personal branding and telling their story is that they have to come up with like this, like they have to spin this like gorgeous story that everyone's gonna be like, oh my God, I'm so like attached to it, whatever, and like actually like what I define as personal branding, this is what I teach my clients, is that branding is not creating a false persona that people will like. It's actually identifying the best version of yourself and then becoming it. So that's this is the work that I take my clients through. It's like, instead of being like, how can I create like a shiny, interesting brand and tell like a cool story that people are going to be compelled to hear or whatever, as opposed to like, who's like the best version of me? What can people learn from that? And how can I actually start to bottle that in a way that like people can actually comprehend and understand? And so with storytelling, yeah, there's the times where I felt like it was fake was when I was being fake, but it's like, think about it this way. We all have stories to tell. And it's like, even things like, actually, I'm going to post about this today. I don't like Christmas and I don't celebrate it. It makes me very sad and it makes me very nostalgic because I grew up in a pre-dysfunctional family, and I avoid it like the plague, and I travel and I pretend like it doesn't exist because it's better than coping with the feelings of sadness. So I'm going to be posting about this actually today. And the point of that story, of me telling that story, is because there's actually a lot of people out there who feel similar. And so when they hear me tell that story about myself, I'm not being like, oh, poor me, like, look at me, I'm so like #authentic. But it's basically like the second half of that story is like, I know that there's, if you have a family to celebrate with, like, it's such a blessing, like, love them, cherish them, like, be with them. And if you don't, like, know that you're not alone, like, know that there's a support system, know that there's people out there who care about you and who like want to be around you. Like, what are you guys going through in these holidays? Like, comment below, like, I want to answer, I want to talk to you. So that sense, like, again, stories every day. And that's just like a specific example, but you're telling a story about your life. Think about like the filter of superficial versus authentic is like, am I telling the story so that everybody can be impressed with how cool I am, how accomplished I am, how successful I am, like whatever, how I did this and this and that? Like, is that why I'm telling the story? Is it to feed my ego? Or is it because I know that there's somebody out there right now in their corporate job, like hating their lives, thinking that it's not possible for them to change like what they're doing? And when I step up into the light and say, hey, look, like I did it. And like, sometimes it sucked. And like but actually I'm pretty good now. Like I really did well on the other end of it. Like, that gives a lot of people courage for them to kind of step out into the light as well. And so when it comes to storytelling, it's always about like, what is the actual intention behind that story? Are you trying to like be like, oh my God, woe is me, like feel so bad for me because I don't like Christmas? Or is it like, hey, look, like I'm raising my hand, like this sucks for me too. Like, what about you? Let's talk about it. So it's two different energies. It's two different ways of approaching storytelling. One is self-serving and like gratuitous is the word, self-serving, gratuitous, and almost like gluttony. And the other one's like, hey, we're in this together. This is bigger. I'm part of this. Like, here's my perspective. I know you can relate. Let's talk about it kind of direction.
Very cool. Well, thank you. I'm hoping she has some eye-opening experiences from that. I really think I did as well. So last question, who inspires you? Can you give me one person that's inspired you to go on this journey or just in your life? Anybody?
Oh my God. Can it be like a celebrity or whatever? Funny because you brought him up. Tim Ferriss is like my freaking soulmate. I can't tell you how many times people have actually referred to me as a female Tim Ferriss because I'm like so like, oh my God, life design. I mean, I build a practice, like my work is even the course that I created about like life design. I'm all about life designing, reshaping the way that you do things, rethinking, hacking, basically challenging what society tells us to do and the way that they say to do it. I really believe that we are the masters of our future. And I also, I use that term loosely because I do believe also in fate to an extent, but I think that the 50% we're given is totally ours to play with. And then there's like the other 50%, which is like God, the universe, whatever. But that our 50% is fully our 50%. We have responsibility over our actions. We get to choose our reactions. We get to choose how we wake up every morning and feel and like act. So so that's, I would say Tim Ferriss is definitely a big idol of mine because he has shown that it doesn't have to be the way that people say, and you can definitely hack things and turn them around and flip them over and have them work out for you marvelously.
It's awesome. Yeah, I've followed Tim Ferriss, but I've never really followed a ton of his content. So I'm definitely more interested in learning more about him. I read the 4-Hour Workweek though. That was good.
Oh, he's amazing. I love him. 4-Hour Workweek, definitely the 80-20 rule has inspired like the entire structure of my business. As you know, like every time that I spend more than 20% of my time making 80% of my income, I always take a step back and I'm like, whoa, let's reevaluate because this isn't working. So it's like a huge marker for me. But yeah, he's a really inspiring guy. And I also wanted to let you know, for anyone who's watching this in your community, they're happy if they want to start learning about the brand story framework, they can download my free PDF that kind of like walks you through storytelling and why it's so important, as well as the brand story framework that I teach my clients, and basically like how they can get started on it so they can start organizing their story into like a structure that helps them basically, instead of being all over the place, that helps them like brand themselves really strategically.
Awesome. And that kind of goes into, how do people find you? How do we find you? How do we follow you? How do we do all that stuff?
For sure. So I am www.CelineDaCosta.com, CELINNEDACOSTA. So that's 2 N's. And you guys can find me on Instagram. I'm posting a story every single day at Celinne Da Costa. Same thing on Facebook, Twitter, everything. I'm at Celinne Da Costa. And on my Facebook, I post a lot, also like articles and interviews like this. And and my email list, if there's a link to that, because that has some golden nuggets in it, so that I don't really disseminate on social media. So if we can maybe post a link to that in the intro.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's her book on my Kindle right here.
Oh yeah, buy my book, guys! It's amazing.
Yeah. You gotta buy the book. Just started.
Can I do like a 1-minute pitch?
Yeah, go for it.
It's called If Hearts Could Talk, and one of the reasons why, obviously, I do coaching for that's my work, my profession, and one of the things I wanted to do was kind of make like a $9.99 like version of like my coaching and support. So it's a collection of short stories around the 5 areas of your life that I believe that if you actually work on and are conscious of, you will improve the quality of your life net. So it's love, vulnerability, change, wonder, and there was another one which I even forgot, but it's good. And then each short story actually has a journaling prompt that's going to help you really dig deep into yourself and understand what it is that you want, why it is that you want it, basically helping you get closer to your purpose and where it's coming from. So tons of really thought-provoking questions that are really going to help you connect with yourself and get the answers that everyone wants, which is like, what's my purpose? Like, what is it that I need? What do I want to do? Like, why do I want to do it? Just do the book and read the book, do the journaling questions, and I am positive that you will get lots of steps closer to those questions.
Awesome. And Katarina said, thank you very much, Celine. It really makes sense. Everything you said, exiting the never-ending circle of panic and depression is the hardest, but the most needed at this point. So I think that was very helpful. So thank you, Katarina, for the question.
That's it. That easy. And then you toss it.
Awesome. So thank you for the time. I really appreciate it. I'm excited for sharing this, and I'm hoping that we can meet up again sometime soon, maybe in California. We were talking about doing that. So we'll see you soon. Thank you for being here.
Thank you guys for tuning in.
All right. Bye, Celine. Talk to you later. Bye.